What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Thursday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here at the Fans First Sports Network. Thursday means we do our State of the Franchise show, and we're going to profile the Super Bowl champs today, the Philadelphia Eagles. And to do that with me, my longtime friend, college roommate, and rabid Eagles fan who is here today, not as a fan, but as an analyst, Gary Ricci. Welcome on board, Gary.
Thanks so much, Kev. I can definitely do that. I will take my fan hat off as much as possible and be completely objective.
I don't believe that for a second, but I'm willing to give you a shot. Now, Gary and Wayne Mazzoni, who is a contributor here at Fans First and on the CoachCast Network, Gary, Wayne, and I were all college roommates many moons ago. And the three of us did a show when I first launched this Call Sheet Daily podcast about our fandoms. Gary with the Eagles, Wayne with the Jets, and myself with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I said to Gary, all right, hey, that was a great show. I love doing that. But, he's going to talk objectively about the Eagles. And you should be able to. You have been a Philly fan for, this number is going to blow us away when I say it,
Jeez.
Almost 50 years, correct?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And, thinking about going back with my dad to the vet, 700 level, the whole 9 yards when I was a little kid. And I think I told that story on the last time I was on. We would ask to leave at halftime because we were cold. He would get all pissed off, which was really
as all fathers did back in that day,
right,
man.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with this. Philadelphia Eagles, man, defending Super Bowl champs. Second time they've won the Super Bowl title in 8 years, or approximately 8 years. But they did it with two totally different groups, different head coaches, different quarterbacks, different star players. That's pretty remarkable. What do you attribute the success to? How are they able to turn it over and go from one group to another group and still win the Super Bowl so quickly?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I attribute it to three factors. The main factor, which is, I don't want to say unusual, but I think it's a kind of like a blueprint for the NFL, is organizationally. I mean, with Lurie, what he brought as far as stability and really a focused, laser-focused goal on what he wanted this franchise to be, he has maintained that for what's it been now, 30 years. So that structure, and then with Howie, of course, restocking talent as time in those 8 years. You started with Wentz, for example, in that first wave with Doug Peterson as the coach, and Wentz was the MVP until he got hurt, basically. And then Foles comes in and works his magic. And then, so that's the early years, the first wave of the Super Bowl. And then you've got Jalen that comes in, takes over. You knew that kid was a leader when he came in, but you didn't know. I didn't think he was going to be as accomplished as a quarterback as he has become. He's one of those guys that he improves literally every single year with obstacles in front of him, new coordinators and all that kind of stuff. So that, to me, the quarterback play was major in the first wave, and of course with Jalen now major in the second wave. But then the third thing I said is in the trenches. I mean, Jeff Stoutland, you had Kelsey, for example, basically for both of those runs. He wasn't in the last Super Bowl, of course. But Stoutland with those guys, and they've had Lane Johnson as a rock, for example. You had the one good thing about Andy Reid and Howie, really, is that they've really focused on the trenches, the offensive line, the defensive line. So they've had that focus, and that goes back to organizationally. They've had that focus for all of those 8 years during those two runs, and that hasn't wavered. And as we know in the NFL, quarterback play is what gets you there. Like, you can't really win without that, realistically. So the fact that they had Wentz as an MVP guy and Hertz, who plays like an MVP in the big stage, I think that's really what are the things that attribute to them being successful over those 8 years.
Yeah, the offensive line and the defensive line, the two lines. I mean, Philly's as dominant as any units in the NFL. They had Andy Weidel there for a long time, too, who had come out of the Ravens system. Obviously, Baltimore's always good up front. Weidel's now moved on to Pittsburgh, and the Steelers have gone heavy on offensive, defensive line since he's gotten there. So that emphasis has obviously paid huge dividends. But these recent Eagles teams, you could argue they're not even as talented as some of the previous ones. When you were younger, I woke up almost every morning in college to Gary Ricci putting on his Randall Cunningham jersey and then dancing around the room. He's wearing it right now.
Objectively, I'm wearing this right now.
Yeah, objectively, yeah. I mean, those were some really talented Eagles teams. The Randall Cunningham, Keith Jackson, Keith Byers, Fred Barnett. They had a lot of talent. And then you move into the Donovan McNabb T.O. era. They were really talented. What's the difference, though? Why have these Eagles teams been able to get over the hump where those previously talented ones could not?
And again, a couple reasons. Yes, those early teams did have talent, even going back to Randall. But going back to what we said before, organizationally, back in the day, you had in the Vermeil years, Leonard Toews, for God's sake, and then in the Buddy years, you had Norman Brayman. Not really organizationally sound. They kind of won in spite of those kind of deficits organizationally. So. With that, though, so the organizational structure wasn't there. But when you go to coaching, for example, I think back in the day, again, you had Vermeil, who was great, but then when he leaves, there's a huge drop-off. You go through the Marion Campbells, which was a mess. You go to, then Laurie comes in, and Ray Rhodes, who was kind of like the bridge to Andy Reid type of thing. Then Andy came through. Andy Reid obviously is a very good coach. He choked consistently for the Eagles in all those glory years that they had, 4 NFC championship games. Lost 3 of them. Goes to the Super Bowl. Has a real opportunity on not a great Patriots team to win. Chokes down there. So I think that's one of the main things is that the coaching now, I think when you go to Doug Peterson, who had his limited success, won a Super Bowl, and now Sirianni, they are much more open-minded coaches, for example. I think they really value trying to be creative, but not in a what's the word I'm looking for?
Not a gimmicky way.
Yeah, not in a gimmicky way. Yeah, there's purpose to it. Both of them, 4th downs, for example. Peterson really opened the door to 4th down. Coaches going for it in 4th down in the league, for example, which now Sirianni has followed. It's almost again an organizational mentality. So I think all those things, and again, going back to the O-line, the things that the Eagles never had in the early days was an O-line. I mean, in the Vermeil years, yes, but in the Buddy years, nothing. Buddy didn't pay any focus on that at all. And then even the Andy Reid years, they had a couple guys, but it wasn't like consistently a dominant O-line where, again, which they've had now, like you've mentioned, for the past 8 years, which I really think make the difference. But organizationally, for sure, has been a huge difference between, back then and now.
It's a shame for Eagles fans that Andy Reid unfortunately had to learn his lessons as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He's obviously matured as a coach. Obviously, having Patrick Mahomes doesn't hurt either.
Correct.
Well, but let's talk about that quarterback position. I did a show about a month ago where I looked at a poll that was conducted throughout the NFL. And this isn't a fan poll. This was general managers, scouts, and head coaches. And they polled them on the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And Jaylen Herz wound up 9th on that list. And I was shocked by that. And essentially my show was about, why is Jaylen Herz underrated? Why do you think he's underrated nationally?
It is mind-boggling to me. I think, like you said, I think a lot of it, honestly, is clickbait. I think these people putting out these polls want people to get angry about Jaylen Herz because they know, especially they know it's going to draw like Eagles fans' eyeballs and ears to watch and listen. Clearly, he's not. When I think when coaches or GMs or whoever or even fans think about your prototypical quarterback, they think of a guy who's 6'5", 235, has a laser arm, all those different things. But how many of those guys right now are winning in the NFL? Right? I mean, sure, he doesn't have, Hertz, for example, doesn't have your 4,000 yards a year and 35 touchdowns and all those things, but he wins. I mean, he does what he's supposed to do. I'll take a winner any day, but that's not to say that he doesn't have those. I think I mentioned to you this before, just texting with you. He doesn't have those traditional stats that are flashy. What he has are those nuanced stats. When you look at throws in the pocket, throws out of the pocket, throws with pressure, without pressure, he's in the top 3 in literally all of those statistics. So he has those things that people can't necessarily see with the naked eye or who don't really kind of understand what's going on offensively in football. But with the bright lights on, he's the best in the league. I mean, he's proved that in 2 Super Bowls where he was the best player on the field in both of them. So I honestly think he gets underrated because people's ideas of what a quarterback should be and flashy stats, that's kind of what people think about. I just think it's criminal that he's not viewed as and valued as at least a top 5 quarterback, if not a top 3.
Yeah. And Gary is a 5'9", 175-pound college quarterback who is a very good college quarterback. He's got a soft spot for those guys who don't necessarily look the part. All right, let's turn our attention, though, to this 2025 Eagles team. A lot of expectations, a lot of weight on their shoulders as the defending champs. Took some hits on defense in the offseason. Let's start on that side of the ball. Are you confident that they've done enough to replace some of the losses, whether it's up front or in the secondary, that they've experienced?
I don't know where my confidence level is. It's not a 10. I'd say, though, it's about an 8, though, because, for example, they lost Milton Williams, one of the big free agent signings at his D tackle. Moro Ojomo has come in. He played the stuff he did last year was good. Now he's coming in a bigger role. He's dominating in camp from all reports, for example. So I think that's kind of almost like a wash. They lost, of course, defensively their DNs. They lost Sweat. BG retired, for example. But they've, Nolan Smith came on like a bull at the last half of the year last year. Jalen Hunt, who was, drafted by a tiny college, came on, former safety, and started wrecking it in the playoffs at defensive end. So they've replaced, I think, that. Cornerback, of course, there's a concern. You guys have Slay now on the Steelers, for example. But, of course, Mitchell's a stud. DeJean's a stud. It's that kind of second quarterback where they're trying to fill in, where it's still not settled yet, so that's a concern. At safety, same thing with C.J. Gardner-Johnson leaving. You've got Blankenship, who's going to be there, but, they got Sidney Brown, who really hasn't caught on since he's been here the last couple of years. They drafted Makuba, the kid from Georgia, I think he is. He's been injured during camp, so they haven't got a real line on him. So I think those 2 positions, for example, are kind of up in the air, but that's not, across the board corners and across the board safeties. It's just that secondary position. I feel like in the draft, defensively especially, they kind of hit home. Jihad Campbell being there, that they took him, who's proven to be a stud already. I mentioned the Pakuba, and then you got that kid from Nebraska, Ty Robinson, Vanilla Gorilla, who's going to give them D-line depth. So I think that's, again, my confidence level would be about an 8. I don't think they're going to be as strong defensively, but Fangio has proven, that he's been able to light a fire under these guys and do what needs to be done. It amazes me that these guys in Miami were like, oh, we really didn't care for Fangio. I'm like, thank you so much for letting him come here, to have number 1D in the league last year. So
yeah, it's funny you bring up Jihad Campbell. I was in Wawa this morning. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are not on the East Coast, Wawa, arguably the greatest convenience store in the history of mankind.
And there's one every 20 feet in South Jersey.
That is correct. If you live in the greater Philadelphia area, you can't, you can hit a golf ball and hit a Wawa anywhere you are. And I ran into a kid named Will Drain, who was the starting right tackle and a defensive end on a really good team we had back in 2020. And we went and played Timber Creek High School, and their wide receiver / defensive end was Jihad Campbell. Oh, wow. And Will Drain shut him out. He did not register a single sack. Wow. And Will's not the biggest guy in the world. He's, for a lineman, he's about 6'2" and 220 pounds or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, Will, have you been watching Jihad Campbell? He said, Coach, I tell everybody I meet, I shut that guy out, blocking him one-on-one. And I said, you're not lying, Will. But the Jihad Campbell we saw at Timber Creek High School, mm-hmm. who was playing wide receiver at about 200 pounds,
that's amazing.
Looked very different than the guy who is now, or at least from what you read,
right.
An absolute monster. And one thing we know about Fangio, he loves those hybrid guys. Mm-hmm. Those guys that you can slot into various roles. So it'll be fascinating to watch Campbell because he can put his hand down. He could play in the middle of the linebacking core. Yep. He's going to be exciting.
Yeah, can't wait.
Yeah. All right, now let's flip it over. Offensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of holes there, man. No. I mean, is this the best offense in the NFL?
It depends on how you define best. Again, you just mentioned not a lot of holes there. Personnel-wise, yes, there's literally not a weakness on that entire offensive side of the field, at least with your starters, of course. Again, we mentioned before about Hertz. Does he have traditional QB stats? No, but again, Running back, yes. Wide receiver, yes. Offensive line, yes. Check tight end even, yes. Check all those boxes for, if they're not the best, they're at least in the top five in their positions or their position groups, for example. Experience-wise, yes. I mean, when I talk about experience, I talk about have they experienced winning? Yes. Okay, and that's a huge thing for an offense to not only have success, but then after you have success, to be able to sustain that. And I think because you have that experience, you can do that because you've seen all the different types of things that happen during a game, happen during a season, and you're able to adapt and adjust and say, hey, we've done this before, let's go do it again. We mentioned about Hertz before. He's a winner. Again, I put him in a top five easily as a quarterback. It's not even close because I think the winning makes a difference. And some of those other quarterbacks, the Burrows, the Lamar Jacksons, etc., who have flashy stats and all this, what are they winning? Nothing. And then it's kind of like A plus at all positions, but it's the depth factor that you worry about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's true for every team in the league. You only have 53 roster spots. It's not college. You don't get 100 guys. And you got to make tough decisions. I mean, man, teams only carry 8 offensive linemen on the active day roster. So you got to make tough decisions. And so depth will be an issue for everybody. Staying healthy is an issue for everybody. A key injury here or there, and your entire season gets derailed. That offense, though, what was it, 52 in the NFC Championship against Washington? Yeah. 40 in the Super Bowl against Kansas City.
It's crazy. Yeah,
and they called the dogs off against Kansas City in the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And that's the thing, again, the only thing that really stops them or could potentially stop them is injury. And I think that's more to skill players. I think, if they're hurt along the offensive line, I think Stoutland's going to kind of fix that, depending who it is, of course. But I'm more concerned about, obviously, Tanner McKee, look at him. I think he's a very, very capable number 2. But if Hertz goes down, that obviously would be a problem, or one of the wideouts, of course. But I think, as far as like stopping them, honestly, if I had to point out a negative, Hertz, for example, at times will hold on to the ball too long. But even that's not a complete minus because it's a 50-50 shot. Sometimes he holds it too long and, he has to run out of bounds or he throws it away. But other times he makes a great scramble and then he's gaining 30 yards. So, it's not really a negative, but if I had to pick something out, that would be it.
Yeah. So what are the expectations? I mean, is it fair to say that this is Super Bowl or bust for the Eagles? Is it because repeating is not easy? There's only been 9 teams that have ever repeated in the NFL. The Eagles are certainly built to do it, but can you hang that expectation on them?
I don't think it's an expectation. I think with them, and they talk about it, they've already put last year aside, which to their credit, they're not talking about repeat. They're not even allowed to use a word in training camp, for example. I think they definitely win the East. I say that because Dallas is a hot mess. The Giants are a hot mess. I think Washington honestly overachieved, to their credit, last year. And of course, Daniels is a stud, but so that's kind of their competition in the East. So I think the East is easily, realistically, their initial goal as it should be. But I think as far as like winning the NFC and going back to the Super Bowl, those other division leaders, you got Detroit, you got the Rams, you got Tampa Bay, they're all able to beat the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles beat the Rams early in the season easily, but then even in the round before the championship game, they were handling them easily. And then they had that kind of scare at the end, which was fine. Detroit, again, was a juggernaut last year, and they got beat. Tampa Bay has always been a thorn in the Eagles' side, no matter what year it is, what era it is. So any given Sunday, any of those teams could beat the Eagles. I think the Eagles can go back. It all comes back to health, like we talked about. They've been pretty good with that in the recent years, with success as everybody being healthy, or at least if somebody did get hurt, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, that person's out, we're going to lose the game now. So I think the expectation, definitely win the East, more than likely back in the NFC Championship game. If they get to the Super Bowl, obviously everybody will be happy, but I don't think people are saying, at least not realistic Eagles fans, for example, are saying, oh, they're definitely going to repeat, because like you said, it only happened, not too many times across these 60 years now.
Yeah, man, these are the best people, the best in the world at what they do. And one thing we know about the NFL, if you get good at a thing, everybody else now aspires to take that thing away. Or imitation is the greatest form of flattery. They're going to copy it and they'll get good at it too.
Right.
And so that bar that you have to clear now to get back into repeat gets higher simply because the competition gets more intense.
Right. And
All right.
as a Super Bowl champion, everybody's now bringing their best. Like
Everybody.
You are circled on that calendar as we're playing the Super Bowl champs. We need to show them what we've got, and we're going to come with everything at them.
Yep. All right. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll get you out of here on this. I ask it of every guest on State of the Franchise. Who is the fan base, or the franchise, I should say, that the Eagles fan base loathes the most? I think this is an easy answer.
This is not a serious question. And I'll preface it like this. Ever since I've been a kid, I mean, even back in the, you start with Tom, for a kid, like, back in the 70s, Tom Landry with the stupid fedora. Okay, the O-line with that stupid up and down shift before they, get in a 3-point stance.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Right now to Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones, the whole thing. So that whole history. I mean, every year WIP has Eagles or Dallas week, a week that they're focused on Dallas. That's all they talk about the entire week. So it's clearly that. It amazes me that the Dallas fans still talk about them being America's team or super team when they haven't done anything in 30 years. It's almost kind of like down here in Washington, people from all over the place, and they act like that franchise has won something in the last 30 years, which they haven't. So, I mean, Dallas, by far, it's not even close. Even the Giants and the Commanders, it's like, I mean, they're in the division, they're rivals, but Dallas is hands down. From the team, the organization, and clearly the fans, it's just, why bother? Why have them around anymore, honestly?
I know you're a season ticket holder.
Yes.
Will you be in attendance for the opener of the show?
I will be there Thursday night on the 4th. Yes, I will. Obviously, I'll be taking Friday off. It's wild that they're starting a season with Dallas. Usually for the last at least 5 years, they've been one of the last games of the. They play them twice, but they've been one of the last home games of the season. So opening with them is kind of crazy. But I guess, when you're Super Bowl champ, they want to put, the most eyeballs that they can on a game. And a Thursday night's going to be wild, so I can't wait. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I'm not a betting man, but Eagles at home raising the banner against the Cowboys in the first game of the season with the Cowboys with a rookie head coach in his first NFL game ever. That feels like lay your money on Philly.
But I will tell you, historically, those are the games that you think, this will be a problem, and the Eagles, crap the bed. So,
Gary, I appreciate you coming on, man. This was a blast.
Yeah, anytime. Happy to be here. We'll come back after the Super Bowl.
Oh, okay. Ooh, look at you. Look at you. Shots fired from the Birds fan. You did a great job being objective, man. So thank you so much.
I tried.
All right. So for Gary Ricci, right, a heck of a quarterback and an even better dancer. This is Kevin Smith for our State of the Franchise episode. Join me tomorrow. The Hot Route, conversations about sports and life with Pez from Pez's Picks, another rabid Eagles fan who actually refers to the Cowboys as the cockroaches. So that'll be tomorrow on tomorrow's show. Until then, hope everybody has a great day. Take care.
Go Birds.